Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Fintech Decoded. This is Musheer along with Monica on Fintech Decoded as an element of breaking down what's been happening in fintech. Typically, we break down verticals or different initiatives in fintech. Now we are building on our series, as you have seen that we've spoken to others in the region and globally, US, MENA, and now we're talking about India, where we will be highlighting elements of what has happened over 2024 and going into expectations on fintech for 2025. Monica ji, welcome. And how have you been?
Thank you so much, Mushi. Always looking forward to speaking on this exciting podcast. And my voice is a little hoarse, so facing the Delhi pollution, but really excited about our conversation today.
Looking forward to it. So why don't we dive right in? You are a leading expert on India and in fintech. So I'm going to largely lean on you to lead and provide the insights, and I'll supplement it. What were for you the key highlights from fintech for 2024 in India? What did you see happening?
So I'll start with the regular because everybody accuses me of always favoring UPI. So I'll go ahead and do that. But UPI hit a new high. We expect this month on month. But in this particular instance, just like we have our 11/11 and these big Thanksgiving days, etc., I think India experienced a little bit of that on Dhanteras and actual Diwali, where we saw a record high for UPI transactions, both in terms of value and volume. And that was about 600 million. So I think we are getting very close to the target that was set to achieve 1 billion transactions a day. And this may not mean a lot for other geographies, but for a country as diverse as India and having the number of digital payment methods, I think this is super. And it actually speaks volumes of how digital payments has penetrated through the pyramid. That's definitely number one. Secondly, the number of headlines that we're now getting all every single month, month on month, has always been with the regulator. And just as of yesterday, as in just this week, there's been a change of guard, and we now have a new RBI governor. And
Yes.
even despite all, so how do you feel about that, Mushir? How do you think things are going to change? Will some
I
of the
mean,
scrutiny be let down?
it's a high visibility role, and there's a lot of responsibility, as it were, right, on the role of an RBI governor. Now, Mr. Sanjay Malhotra, he comes in with deep expertise in working with the prime minister, and so he's very much aware and actively involved in financial decisions for the country. So I think it probably there's some continuity there, or alignment, more alignment with what government policies are going to be, and how the RBI aligns with it is going to be the key. Of course, you do want the RBI to also be able to take independent decisions on the economy, which goes in sync with what the government is doing, and do it at a pace that is it's just a tough challenge, right? Enabling economic growth while containing inflation, right? That's the big balance that they always try globally, and India has done fairly well in that balance. So hopefully we can see that continue, and the other elements people will probably be looking for. And this is a side note, but I think a lot of us would be keen to see how the RBI looks at fintech. As you mentioned, there've been uh, quite a bit of regulatory actions over this year, in particular on lending, over digital banking. Some of the largest players in India were censored or were restricted in terms of what they could do, and some of them have fulfilled the terms that require, so they're back on board. But the regulatory oversight coming in is important, but essentially how fintechs react to it and are able to build towards stricter regulatory frameworks is going to be important. And on the other piece, which is closer to my heart, being uh, would be good to understand and see what the new governors what's the right term for it? The new governor's approach and view on virtual assets is. So, how enabling that will be and give that right push towards formal regulations on crypto in India is going to be important.
Actually, there was a lot of commentary yesterday whether with because India is one of the countries which has openly um, that has openly stated about being conflicted about the cryptocurrency situation and is not in favor of it. So it would be a very interesting take because a lot of the the crypto related exchanges have not done well. There's been fraud related scrutiny and of course cases that have been reported, but the governor is expected to take a stance on this. But again, that's what the hope of the community is. But I also feel that there are a couple of great changes that would probably be happening next year, which have started this year, which I think we should definitely acknowledge. And one is about the build out of the SRO, self-regulatory organizations, and one of them has already got a license. So I think that's going to be something significant because the RBI in its payment vision document had also stated that they do feel that there is a need to regulate fintechs and big techs and everybody else in the country. And it goes very well with this development because essentially then the companies will be able to have a voice which represents not just their interests but are able to have a consultative dialogue with the regulator who happens to be a very open one. And since you mentioned regulations earlier and the crackdown that has happened, I think there's not one person on the India fintech side who would tell you that this is not one, it's like being under a scanner all the time. And there has been a lot of conversation because almost every single week and sometimes every single day in the last year, there have been regulations one after the other which have come out, which have severely impacted certain use cases that we saw had become mainstream. Now, keeping in mind that in India, as far as fintech funding is concerned, lending was one of the primary use cases which got a lot of attention post 2021, and a lot of money was going into it. With the lending guidelines now becoming operationalized, I think it has put a severe dent on the growth of the lending industry. From the RBI's perspective, they are trying to safeguard the customers, but from the companies and that are involved in the ecosystem, there has been pushback. But at the end of the day, it's about being able to operate within these safeguards. So I feel that that is also one thing that has really majorly captured everyone's attention, whether it's VCs, whether it's builders, whether it's existing companies that have been trying to branch out into lending or others. What is your take on this, Mushir? Like, do you also hear that a lot?
I think lending, it's been obvious, right? And they've also been the element of trying to do enforcement because of the number of scams or illicit lending operators that were there, which is impacting wide market and obviously quite a few of the vulnerable population who are taking these loans at very high rates while and then unethical practices being used up. So you can see where RBI was coming from for this in terms of consumer protection. But yes, it is an adjustment that is needed for everybody in the space.
Definitely. And definitely in terms of the funding itself, I think nobody in this world, in any part of the world, would say that the funding winter is over. It doesn't seem so. In fact, in India, I have a very interesting statistic that in Q1 of 2021, India saw about 293 million come in. Q4 of 2021, it was about 2.95 billion in funding that was received. And by Q2 of 2024, this actually has gone down to about 293 million. So you can imagine almost like a one tenth of what it used to be. So it's been a major pushback in the market, both in terms of loss of jobs as well as, of course, a loss of fervor in terms of building out new use
Yeah.
cases. And we've not heard a lot of great news coming from the ground. And I think this is symptomatic of all the regions.
Yeah, I mean, fintech funding globally has been slow. I think some cases in the US it was decent. I think the Middle East was the only one that kind of bucked the trend, but also a lot of that was more early stage. In India, we probably are, when you look at VC funding, we probably down that path of not so much, but the as we were discussing, there's more money coming in from public fundraising, right? So IPOs is
Yes.
something people are looking at. How are you seeing the
I think a lot of
go on, please.
So, Mushir, having said, a lot of companies say that IPOs is the only way out. I'm not sure. Like, a lot of IPOs happen. A lot of big tech companies. When I say big tech, for us, anything in the internet, in consumer internet that has gone IPO has done very well. There have been companies that didn't do so well in the last 3 years and suddenly find that consumer sentiment has completely changed and their share prices have hit a new high. So fintech, in that sense, is showing a sliver of that optimism that we see, and of course, the market opening up to a lot of these young investors who are looking to invest in these new age companies. And of course, the IPO race also means that the compliance that they have to adhere to will become very stringent. And the market also is a very strong testament to what consumers really think about the product. So we know of a few IPOs that are definitely going to happen. They were expected in 2024. They didn't happen in 2024. So you should be expecting a lot more headlines in this space. But essentially, the markets will be the real test of whether fintech and fintech new age companies are able to build the value and have the same trust that most of consumers in India have in terms of banks and how they feel about the financial sector. I think that will be something to watch out for in 2025.
Yeah, it's almost like you buy what you use, right? So for Zomato, Swiggy,
Yes.
Paytm, etc. So you have an affinity because you feel you are using these companies. So and I think in general wealth, then most people look at it with crypto and other elements where you feel related to it. So I think that's going to be a driver for the IPOs. Typically in India, IPOs tend to do fairly well. Some have not done so well a little while after, but the issuance typically goes well and oversubscribed. I know so many people who tried getting a piece of different IPOs, but were unable to do so because they didn't get an allocation, despite trying a lot. So I mean, but that's a good thing, which means there's a decent depth in the market. Talking about wealth and trading, I think we did see in India's stock market reached record highs. At one stage, it was was larger than Hong Kong, getting into the top four stock market by market cap in the world, which was great news for the economy and showing the robustness and the need of global players needing to now also allocate a piece to India as part of their global portfolio outside of whichever they're looking at outside of the US or other major economies. However, we also then saw newer rules that came up or updates on rules on transaction fees, where you now have SEBI bringing in rules for everybody to pass on the funding that companies get. Sorry, the brokerages get in terms of discounts for large volumes to use the true to label norms. So if there's a discount that the broker gets from an exchange, say Nifty, say NSE or BSE, they'll then have to pass that discount on to the traders or end user and buyers. Essentially, as some people would call it, this is known as best execution and best rates. However, what that also means is there some of the no cost brokers who are operating would then have to look to add a certain surcharge of fee to make up for that loss of revenue which they were getting from these discounts that they used to keep because they are cumulatively providing that volume to the exchanges. So let's see how that turns out. And it may not be a significantly large element, but I think that just means it will have a little impact. However, longer
Yes.
term, talking about trends, etc., I'm very, very good. I also believe that there's going to be, there needs, there, we're still in very early stages of development when it comes to advisory, in terms of the mass affluent being well served, even the wealthy are being well served in India, both from a tech but also services perspective. So it's a big trend for me in the coming year or two, is going to be the sophistication, or the maturing of the wealth tech and wealth industry in India as it becomes more normalized, especially for the 100 to 200 million urban users or mass affluent users, who are starting to spend more wealth.
And thank you for bringing that up, Mushir, because that also goes well with. In fact, we did an interview with PG Mahesh earlier, who runs the Medhy platform and the account aggregator services. And that is going to be a major, at least for me, I think we should watch out for what this will mean. Suddenly, with personal finance becoming really important, and we've seen the crackdown on fin influencers, when I mean personal finance management, etc., becoming mainstream to especially the younger digital population. And we start seeing the uptake with a lot of banks joining in, the number of transactions going up, then it will spawn a list of use cases that will be essential in wealth tech. So I see that as a major uptake that will happen next year. And goes without saying that this actually brings me to one of the other topics in this segment, which is kind of regulatory in nature. It's also got diplomatic undertones, but it's about the launch of a new currency or our existing efforts on CBDC, which have become mainstream again this year. There was a lot of conversation about the BRICS currency, India taking part, not taking part. Then the recent announcement after the president-elect has mentioned that anybody who is working against the US dollar or de-dollarization will be taken to task literally. I think it really becomes a case where India will have to choose which way they go. But the previous RBI governor, Mr. Shaktikanta Das, made it very clear that as far as CBDCs are concerned, they are not competing with UPI, and programmability as an offline capability as options are definitely something that will be rolled out. So it hit new milestones in terms of the pilot use cases, but it's not where it was expected to be. So I wouldn't say that the response is tepid, but I guess India is not applying the accelerator just as yet. So things are slow, but they are moving, and a lot of the use cases have been tested out. So we should be hearing again not just headlines, but actual uptake on these use cases, which should hit the road next year. And this will be aligned very closely with what's happening also on the cross border payment side, where UPI, through its international arm, is going international with NPCI International, going to many countries, having one on one bilateral relationships. So it's a very exciting space to watch, because while CBDC's retail is something that will pick up in India, my forecast is that as far as cross border transactions is concerned, it will ride the typical payment rails, which is through faster payment systems. So wanted to hear your take, because you were on the other side hearing not just about a couple of projects that have been rolled out by leading institutions like BIS, but also how do you see blockchain, crypto, and others making a dent in this space?
I think for me, yeah, I think for me, it's a lot about looking at a utility of a retail CBDC versus a wholesale CBDC. I think that's going to be important. Secondly, is looking at uh, how there's cross-border nature of CBDCs, right? So those two essentially are going to be a key element of how we move forward on CBDCs. When you look at retail CBDCs, there have only been three retail CBDCs or four retail CBDCs outside of Nigeria, who have launched and are have gone fully live versus pilot. Like even if you look at the Chinese e-renminbi, that is still in pilot. It's not wholesale, large scale implementation. So I think there is times around it, and there isn't a competition with UPI because UPI is more a network, whereas CBDC is talking about a currency. So programmability, as you mentioned, is going to be the key. And then now with the new governor, there may be slightly different approaches. The geopolitics does matter broadly, but this is
Absolutely, definitely. And I think there's one thing other than this that we should look out for in 2025, which will be hopefully the end of the funding winter. But having said that, I think a lot of the companies and the fintechs that we hear have been doing really well and are actually having a lot of consumers in one side of the vertical space that we find will start moving to different verticals. The super apps, which have done well, will suddenly try to move outside the country because there is a significant nascent population, and of course, the need to be able to adapt to this technology and bring this technology to other countries. So, I feel that we should be hearing a lot more funding and globalization related discussions next year. Especially with Indian innovation and builders leading the way, and fintech is definitely the primary use case which has done well and has got a lot of laurels. In fact, most unicorns in India actually belong to the payments and the lending side, so basically fintech. So I'm really excited about that in 2025. Apart from, of course, all the new policies that will happen, but cannot finish this without mentioning that C word, which is compliance. I think everybody is saddled in the ecosystem with compliance to regulation, and that has been slowing things down significantly. I think it's fair to admit that compliance becomes the top number one priority for everybody in the ecosystem, as it should be in the financial world. But I hope that we are able to ride past this and then suddenly start seeing a lot more of the highlights being new products, new services, and a lot more companies getting launched, either in the public or the private side of getting funding.
yeah, it looks quite interesting in terms of where things are globally. I think there will be more momentum. It's a growing economy. There's a lot more people coming onto the digitization world. We still have a few 100 million people who are not yet digitalized or and are not using smartphones. So I think that's going to be quite a big initiative that the government initiatives that are going on, but also for all of the fintechs to kind of build on. And secondly, I do feel user loyalty or retention will maybe stabilize over 2025.
Hmm.
It's a broad call, but in India, it was especially 2022, 2023. I think there was just this mad craziness where everybody were chasing new users and there was discounts and onboarding offers and vouchers and coupons, and everybody were trying everything and jumping from one to another. I do feel that craze has come down significantly. I don't see so much being spoken about, also because the VCs and investors have switched from user number focus to revenue focus, right? So which means you then want to retain users, you want to build product, you want to make sure that it is not just about user acquisition at a small cost or a large cost when you scale up. Small vouchers add up. So that I think is going to be a major thing. But generally, I think the existing 600, 700 million, 800 million people who are online, the products that they have, that switch to get to newer products is going to become more challenging. So there'll be more inertia because there's only so much you want to try, and once you get used to something, you don't necessarily move so much more. That's my gut feel. But you're on the ground. What would you say?
I totally agree with you, and also I think the users fatigue and expectations of being able to get say new promotions, always having the cost of consumer acquisition is actually going to go down significantly as consumers expect less, but they do demand quality of service. So I think consumers are also maturing on the curve, and that's something which is actually good for the markets. But the one thing that most of the companies will have to solve for is getting into the tier two and tier three. because that's where the major audience lies. And I remember you having said that it is that in one of our earlier episodes, if it's possible to have like a TikTok version being developed in India or something on social media that kind of encapsulates the payments use case and other use cases that can be built around it. And I would be very excited to know what the future has in hold for us there, because consumers are definitely getting much more aware and sticking to the game. So that is why Paytm consumers and the number of users that were there was significantly hit during when the regulatory related restrictions were placed. But you're already seeing that go up. So I think that's one. I mean, it also shows the maturity of the market, which is currently on the upswing.
Yeah, I think that maturity will start playing out, and we will probably start seeing more collaboration. I think is could be an element that we could see between, or let me say, be interesting to see how the fintechs start collaborating. Those who have matured and grown in size versus those who are growing. Whether there will be a model or will people go on their own and just start building in silos. So the ecosystem play versus the silo play of the super apps is, I think, going to be quite interesting.
Absolutely.
I think we've more or less covered a lot in this segment. Anything else you want to add before we close?
No, really looking forward to an exciting year. A lot more of FinTech Decoded podcast with you and the team. And I think we should be hearing more headlines from India, which is a good thing.
Yeah, and stay tuned, everyone. We will cover a lot more deep dives in 2025. And also for this part, in terms of the deep dive on what's happened in 2024 and looking forward to 2025, we'll be looking to cover almost all the major markets in the world. Next up is going to be Hong Kong, where I'm based, where we'll be speaking to Medhy Souidi in terms of looking at what's happening in Hong Kong and what we can expect in the next year. So stay tuned. FinTech Decode is here for you. Follow us if you're not already a follower, subscriber, and give us your feedback on what you expect the trends to be for the coming year and how you have experienced FinTech over 2024. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to FinTech Decoded. We are here with a very good friend whom I co-founded the FinTech Association with and have been in touch since 2016, where we nearly worked for the same company. We had offers at the same time and then kind of stayed in touch since then. Somebody who is a thought leader, but also a big part of the community and growing the community in different elements. Medhy Souidi, thank you so much for joining us. Medhy is a transformation lead at DBS Hong Kong, but also leads thought leadership with his What the FinTech newsletter, which is one of the most insightful newsletters on FinTech in Hong Kong and Asia. Welcome, Medhy.
Thank you very much, Musheer, and thank you for the very kind introductions. I think it's more than what I could expect from you, and it's always great to see you and do project catch up and be on the same environment and ecosystem because you are one of the most kind person there. So I'm very happy to do this podcast with you.
You're being very kind. I mean, Medhy is definitely the nicest person in FinTech in Asia by far and the most helpful as well. Always thinking
Not at
about
all,
you.
not at all.
Congratulations on your baby.
Oh, thank you.
Start to the FinTech dad now. So yes,
Yeah.
right. Audience, what we're gonna do is as part of our series, we're reviewing what has happened in different regions at the end of 2024 and what are expectations for 2025. You will hear from us on different regions across different markets, and in this element, we are going to be discussing about what has happened in Hong Kong broadly over the last year. And Medhy, why don't we kick off with your views on what have been the dominant themes in financial services over 2024?
Yeah, sure. You are very aware of it, and I think most of the people saw it. The big focus was GenAI and AI in general. Everyone speak about GenAI, and it's kind of crazy to see that every levels of employees of corporate, can be big corporate or startups, use GenAI today or want to use it or have heard about it. Still, if you look at bigger organization with like 5,000 or 10,000 people, maybe not everyone has used it, but you can see sometimes you can speak with your parents, you can speak with your friends, or you can speak with your nephew or students. They all have tried at least to use ChatGPT, sorry, POE, Perplexity, or other platforms. So this has a big focus, mostly for cost savings or improvement of the systems, or improvement of the employee workflow. But it can be also like sometimes benefits generated. So it can be revenue, it can be customer satisfactions, employee satisfactions. It can be also in terms of FT savings, so full-time employment savings, who are not replaced by GenAI, but can be reallocated or reskills to other tasks. So it means the company won't fire anyone. They will keep the same number of employees, but instead of having 10 people doing, I don't know, like content creation, a manual, writing or tasks, they will use GenAI to do it, and then those people can do other tasks that they could not focus on it before. And this is very interesting. I see also this shift not only from financial institutions, but also we can see it from different companies. It can be real estate, it can be fashion, it can be also other industries like supply chain or logistic.
Sure.
Um, yes, it was the biggest focus. And when I speak with head of innovation, transformation leads, I can understand that from their companies, from their industry, if they had innovation funds before, for example, everything shift to Gen AI or shift to AI. So it's quite
Yeah.
interesting to see that everyone is pushing there. And a few years ago in Hong Kong, you had still Hong Kong is a place where you have Web3, and I'm sure you're quite aware of it, right? Web3,
Yeah.
digital assets, there are still big buzzwords here, but less than before. And companies or people who are focusing on metaverse, NFTs, or experimentation on blockchain are now like all focusing on GenAI as well. So maybe I can ask you back the questions. Where did you see like some progress? Are you more excited about the virtual asset license in Hong Kong because it was one of the big topic and you are one of the experts on this matter? Or are you also excited about Gen AI, or did you see something different here?
No, thanks. Thanks for that. I think it's very pertinent on Gen AI, right? It's probably what we're seeing is the maturity of the technology and broader use case, right? And a couple of other things to add to Medhy's insights is the regulators in Hong Kong are actually pretty much up to pace. The Hong Kong Monetary Authority, the de facto central bank, has been issuing various papers on AI and banking from the last 4 5 years. They also did one recently, which talked about use of Gen AI in banking, looking at the risks and how that can be handled. Interestingly enough, they have also launched a sandbox on Gen AI use cases along with Cyberport, the fintech ecosystem hub in Hong Kong. On the other side, SFC, which is the securities regulator, has and futures regulator has also issued a paper on the risks with Gen AI and the use thereof by licensed institutions. So you can see that they are up to speed, and we will see a lot more in the coming year. I think that's definitely going to become more pervasive. On the virtual asset side, as Medhy mentioned, Hong Kong has been one of the key areas or jurisdictions for virtual asset development globally. In particular, regulations wise, you could say that they have been quite actively looking at it for 7 8 years. In particular, this year was important because the SFC had given a deadline of June of this year for virtual assets trading platforms, essentially your exchanges, to apply for a license with the SFC. And you had about 22 who applied, and now there are about 11 or so in the wings. 3 have been approved, 2 which were previously, and 1 very recently. Actually, now 4 have been approved. I think there's 1 that recently got approved. So we are seeing a growth. One other element that people aren't aware of in Hong Kong, you can get virtual assets licenses through other means, essentially through uplift of what's known as the Type 1, Type 4, Type 9 licenses, which is your broker dealer advisory and asset management. You apply if you have more than 10% of your services or products focused on, or AUM focused on virtual assets. So that's on the virtual assets. Broadly, I think there's been quite a bit of growth. The MA has also been doing sandboxes where they've been looking at Project Ensemble, looking at EHKD POCs for stablecoins and for EHKD broadly. And the other thing we have seen is the evolution or maturity of the Enbridge project, where the BIS Innovation Hub Hong Kong was leading it, and now it's been handed back to central banks. And the last piece, I think, on the tokenization BA is the tokenization piece, and we can talk about it. Maybe your views on tokenization by the banks and the use of blockchain.
So not on tokenization, but on crypto retail services. I think ZA Bank, one of the virtual bank in Hong Kong, I think it was the first one to reach 800,000 customers and maybe the first one to be profitable.
Yeah.
Just launched last week the first offer to retail crypto tradings for Bitcoin and Ethereum. I think for this one, they are partnering with Hashkeys Exchange to provide the bank secure and compliance trading services with, if I'm correct, zero commission fees for the first 3 months. So it's quite interesting to see this strategy as well. In terms of tokenization, I didn't see so much recently when I was discussing with other banks, but more and more cross-border platforms like Partior, done in Singapore by Temasek, JP Morgan, and DBS, are operating across Asia. And also, I saw that Partior just raised a Series B last week. I don't remember exactly the figures, but I think it's around like 30 million of USD. I can be wrong here, but that's what I saw last week, I think. And I was speaking with a few experts on Web3 and the blockchain technology. And they were mentioning that not only in bank, because you and me, we are more on the fintech side than the rest. But they were mentioning to me that telco and other companies like companies for goods as well, or big brands on electronics, are also now doing more and more on Web3, are doing more on blockchain. And they find interest way to interact with the customers, where like banks, because they are super regulated, they cannot do anything. Like it's very difficult to open a bank account on the metaverse. It should not be possible today, but maybe on some jurisdiction it's possible. So most of for example, for Hong Kong, when all the banks were on the metaverse, it was mostly like entertainment experience, visiting Hong Kong through different angles or different experiences. So yeah, tokenization, I would say, except purpose bond money and EHKD, I didn't see so much news on my side, or I didn't give so much, thought about it. So, but do you have like an example you would like to raise, and maybe we bring something back to me and we can discuss a bit more?
I think the big one was HSBC going into tokenization of gold, right? And being that to customers. So I think that's a pretty strong indicator that is helping lead traditional finance firms to come into tokenization. I think the other piece is, broadly speaking, the ETF. Hong Kong is one of the few jurisdictions globally and among the first to do both Bitcoin and gold ETFs. Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs. And you have
It's
very
over the
large.
place now. Everyone are doing it.
Correct. And you had a very large mainland Chinese asset managers, or originating from mainland China, or asset managers, issuing these ETFs. I think that's a good news. And broadly, the blockchainification of finances is a big focus. And so the story into stable coins going into next year, I think, is going to be interesting. So talking about that, how are you looking at next year? What would be a couple of themes that you feel will be dominant in 2025 when it comes to fintech in Hong Kong?
Yeah, I would say still GenAI. There's a big push. I know from the discussion I got on market and with colleagues from different companies that they are still doing a lot of projects for this year. What I can say, and maybe it's a bit controversial here, we may have, and I'm sorry for the French accents, disillusion of GenAI, where a lot of people are expecting way more than what GenAI can do and putting a lot of efforts and money there, but don't anticipate any of the outcomes and maybe a bit, disappointed about the different outcomes. Because GenAI can do certain tasks well, but for others, they still need like human in the loop. to verify the result, and also still need human touch to operate with, for example, the customer on the call centers or customer services. Because
Sure.
even if we can solve some easy request or simple request like a chatbot enhanced by GenAI, when the case become more complex, you still need the human with empathy to support you there.
Mm.
I would say same for most of the tasks we are doing. So, for example, if you use yourself ChatGPT or any other platforms, you may ask for some requests, and sometimes it doesn't give you what you want as a result. So you still need to work
Yeah.
with it, and sometimes it doesn't even can do what you are expected to do. So generally, is still a big focus, kind of disillusion for some of the people or management teams of some of the companies. Of course, virtual assets in Hong Kong is where they are pushing, and Web3 as well. So hopefully a bit more on this side.
Yeah.
And what else I can say?
What
There's
about
also
the? Sorry, I was just going to ask, what are your thoughts on the conversation around open banking? Right, we had phase 3, phase 4 coming in, but now it's been renamed. How do you see that? You know, developing in 2025?
yeah. So the Open API changed to what they call interbank account data sharing. So the name is IADS, and this basically it's an initiative to aims to allow the different customers to securely and efficiently share their bank account data with other banks, subject to customer consent. So it can be, for example, I work for DBS and I want to share my data to another bank, let's say HSBC.
Mm-hmm.
I should be able to do it this year. So on this list, I think most of the banks are participating. I'm not sure if it's like 25 or 30 banks there, but you have like most of the commercial banks, virtual banks such
Yeah.
as Levy, MoxZA, WeBank, for example. You will have like Standard Chartered, you will have HSBC, DBS. So I think for most of the requirement and implementation is yeah, it's been done, and so now we are looking at the next phase of development. Um, yeah, I would say at this moment it's still not available for anyone, but
Yeah.
we are just on December 2024, so 2025 should be good. And I know like Planto, so Digital U and
Yeah.
Nkit Asuri are quite vocal on this because I think they are supporting some of the companies here as a
Yeah.
consultant or expert matters on the topic, and they really try to move the needles there.
Yeah. I think there's been a lot of work done over 6 years, 7 years now on that
Mm.
open banking. And the other thing that will complement this is going to be the commercial data interface, the CDI, that
Mhm.
HKM has been working on, which essentially allows for collecting and sharing of data from SMEs or even very small micro SMEs to enable better credit for them. But enabling data sharing also, it's going to be important. You're also seeing the growth of the I am Smart um, product, which is essentially run by the Hong Kong government in an identity sharing conversation that could enable more open finance, right? And I think 2025 will see a lot more work intra industry, so outside of financial services, working telcos, retail, etc., which would be more. Virtual assets, agreed. I actually think next year is going to be the big story around more asset management, more crypto funds, etc., coming up in Hong Kong. But also there is going to be the resolution or finalization of round 2 of consultation on OTC licenses, which I think is quite important. Plus the announcement, hopefully over the next few weeks, on the remaining VATP licenses, so becomes more robust, having a lot more regulated entities operating in Hong Kong. So the conversation then moves towards cross-border, various tokenization schemes and trade finance elements. Look out for the Hong Kong Web3 Harbor coming up with a blueprint. We're working on an element of Web3 blueprint, starting off with financial services. So keep an eye out for that. And in general, I think one of the few things in terms of events to look forward to, of course, 10th anniversary of the Hong Kong FinTech Week, end of October, early November next year. Then, of course, the major blockchain crypto event is going to be around Consensus, happening for Asia for the first time mid-February. So those would be the key elements. We haven't spoken much about insurance, but largely InsurTech has been stable over the last year. Companies like One Degree, who have now renamed again, I'm trying to get their name, but have turned profitable, looking at multiple elements, including virtual assets, but also AI, I think is going to be the theme. One theme we probably missed
So,
is,
sorry to
go on.
interrupt you. I saw like One Degree was supporting the HKMA AI sandbox.
Correct. Yeah.
I think the name of the team is AI Rate Solutions, and this should help banks, I think, to test and deploy the different AI responsibility and addressing the different risks like security, bias, and privacy, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. I think cybersecurity is going to be the other major theme, which is a global story, nothing new here. But cybersecurity, I think, definitely is going to play a major role in terms of just development of cybersecurity frameworks, standards, and implementation. The last piece, if I may quickly touch upon, is going to be about cross-border elements. We already seen many different digital initiatives when it comes to connecting between Hong Kong and the rest of the Greater Bay Area. But I would also imagine that Hong Kong plays a critical role as a super connector for mainland Chinese fintech enterprises who are looking to go overseas, in particular towards Southeast Asia and the Middle East, and Hong Kong will play a big part in that. Any final thoughts, Medhy?
I think we cover most of the thing right now. But of course, I'm looking for more surprises, to be honest with you, especially in the Hong Kong market. Sometimes we even like are surprised by what's happening. I know like there is a Web3 festival also every year in March that attract a lot of Chinese companies and Chinese advocate for blockchain and Web3. There's also Blocktober organized by Web3 Harbor as well, I think, just before the FinTech Week. And I'm just thinking about this loud. Actually, I've been invited to a few small events recently, and I was quite surprised by the quality of it. For example, the one done by Fano Labs, Innovations on AI was incredible, a very, very good one. One done by Accenture recently on Web3 during the FinTech Week. It was a side event, was quite good as well. I think with Xtrust and I don't remember which other company, but they had like good speakers and it was very focusing on wallet and it's not a discussion you can see a lot actually because they really focus on one use case, give a lot of insight, and it was not like kind of a macro view of what's happening in Hong Kong actually.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key things is you're seeing a lot more in-depth conversations and more use cases that people are trying to develop through these innovative technologies, right? It's no longer a case of let's just just talk about it, but people are like, okay, not too wide, let's go deep so that we can start implementing. I think that's one key thing that's happening. Perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We will keep updating. You will see the link to what the FinTech in the description, also in the comments. So stay tuned, follow both What the FinTech as well as FinTech Decoded for more news and information around FinTech, digital assets, and Web3 in Asia. Thank you so much, Medhy. I know busy day.
Thank you, Musheer, for the invite.
For joining us. Thank you so much.